Richard, thank you so much for joining me again today, brother.
Brother, it was an honor and a privilege to serve on your platform. Anytime I'm with you, I feel safe and I'm just ready to let it rip.
Dude, I cannot wait. It truly is a blessing having you back on the pod. It's been, can you believe it? It's already been almost 2 years since the last time you joined me on the show. It's amazing how fast time flies, right? But something we chatted about the other day, even on the phone as we were catching up before this episode, is how different life looks for Richard Yeargin now, right? I'm interested, dude, if you could just maybe give our listeners, maybe those that tuned in a year and a half ago or so and heard your testimony, heard your story, help them understand, this newfound purpose and vision that you feel like God has placed on your life for such a time as this.
Man, thank you for the question, first and foremost. It's been a journey. Since the last time we've spoken, I got married to my beautiful,
Let's
beloved
go.
sweetheart. We've gotten our relationship to a whole nother level over the past 2 years. We were at a crossroads the last time you and I spoke. And we were either going to be or not be. Just being very honest with you, right? And I was at a place in my life, man, where as a man, you're in a dog fight every day. Your back is up against the wall. Because you're not trying to protect your reputation, you're trying to develop your character, right? Who am I going to be for the next 30 to 40 years of my life? That's where I was. And I was proving that each and every day by how I showed up. And so life's in life in the right direction and in the right way. I was on the right wavelength. And March 16th, 2022, we made it real. And me and my wife, awesome. We finally took that next step in our relationship to heal and just let God mend broken hearts and broken pieces and put it back together. And man, from that point on, my life took off. Became a college professor within the next 3 months here at Clemson. Realized that what I had been through with my accident was finally coming to a close. So I've been fighting a 6-year battle in court, lawsuit against the state of South Carolina for my accident, and finally received reciprocity from the situation. And even though financially it was nice to kind of alleviate some stress off my plate and be able to do some of the things that I had to put on hold for a little while I was trying to kind of work through the minutia of life. It just seemed like God just said, just release in order to receive. And, at that point in my life, man, I released everything back over to him. And when he gave it back to me, it was way better than I could have ever thought or imagined it would be.
Wow. Isn't it crazy how sometimes we have to surrender or give up control, right, and be out of control, but yet we give God the control that he was always meant to have in our lives. And that's when we feel, in a sense, the most at peace, the most comforted, the most in control of our own stories, because God's the one that's always orchestrated our steps. And I feel like I've witnessed that, right, from a distance, just watching you and your life story unfold. Like you said, you got married to your beautiful wife, Kayla, and then all of a sudden your life is just taken off, man. Like, you've done amazing things. You're speaking, you're on the speaking circuit. God is using you as a professor just to invest into the lives of the next generation. And man, it's encouraging in my heart. You've encouraged me. That being said, today what I can't wait to unpack, right, is your new book that you released this past spring. Its title, The Man is Greater Than the Brand: Shedding Past Brokenness to Live as Kings and Queens. Bro, before we dive into just the nooks and the crannies and the principles and the lessons and characteristics that you really unpack for us in that book, I'm interested in asking, beyond the title, what's really at the core or the heart or the message behind this book that you feel like God placed on your heart?
Your reputation sometimes supersedes your character, or oftentimes supersedes your character. So Your reputation is the outward of appearance, what people receive by looking at you, but not knowing you. But when you get to
Mm,
know the inner man is ugly, right? Like the inner man got some
yeah.
issues. Your character has some flaws. And when those things are brought to the light out of the dark, and you share your journey with people, the real journey, like not, oh, look at where I'm at today, right? And you base my
Yeah.
reputation based off of where I am today, but I want you to see the full picture. I wanted to unravel,
Mm,
right, like those layers of brokenness and create a message that was going to transcend beyond what the eyes could see, right? So for me,
mhm.
it's simple. Your character outweighs your reputation 10 times out of 10, right? You could submit a great
Mm,
resume for a job, but then you show up on the job and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. You nothing like what you described you were on your resume, right? Like, so for me,
right.
I show up every day and I have a job to do as a husband, as a father, as a professor, as a speaker, as an author. Da, 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 da. All this stuff is, all these titles are great, but who is Richard Yeargin as a man?
Come on.
And I can honestly and confidently say, as a man, I'm a man of character that operates out of his faith, and everything that I do exemplifies integrity, honor, courage, and excellence. And I stand on it.
Mm,
And my mission matches my vision because, look, I'm on a mission to serve others first, or serve God first, others
yep.
second, and myself third. In that
That's
order:
right.
God first,
That's
others
right.
second, myself third. So it, to me, everything is in alignment based upon my
Mm,
character, not my reputation.
mm. I love that. Like you said, it's that heart or that mindset of I am third, right? God first, others second, me third. And I also love this kind of concept that you're breaking down for us, which is this idea that what I do will never determine or define who I am. Dr. James Dobson, he's one of my favorites, right? He has a quote out there that says, life will trash your trophies. In the end, the only thing that matters is who you loved and who loved you, right? And that's what I believe is the most important thing for us to really grasp. I always say that the modern day definition of the word tragedy, becoming good at the things that simply don't matter, right? So
Mm,
trying to understand, like you're talking about, this internal state of development, right, of improvement, and constantly buying into that process and not getting lost with all of the different things that life will offer us along the way, not
right.
getting lost in our reputation, but instead allowing the light to shine on who we are in our character development.
Yeah.
Something I always love to talk about, Richard, and something I love about you is
Thank
we're already hearing it today, is your vulnerability. I've read through your book, man, and you are very vulnerable, and you share with us not the lessons that you learned on the mountaintops and the high moments of life, but more so the lessons that you've learned along the valleys. I think that's the most important thing for all of our listeners, maybe even the young athletes out there that may be listening to us today, to help them understand that pain is inevitable in this life, right? John 16:33 reminds us that in this world we will have trouble. James chapter 1 verse 2 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. It's not a
you.
matter of if, it's a matter of when. And your story really reminds me of another one of my favorite quotes that I have written down, right? The legendary boxer Mike Tyson. What does he say? Everybody's got a plan until they
So,
get punched in the mouth.
woo,
Life, bro. Life has a way of punching us in the mouth. It has a way of blindsiding us. And it's in those moments, it's not about, right, the pain, right, that ultimately matters. It's not about the punch. It's about how we respond to the punch. For you in your life, man, I know you've been blindsided. You already kind of mentioned your car accident, but you've talked about a lot of vulnerabilities and times in life where, man, you went through some broken seasons. Could you help us just give us a picture or an overview of some of those punched in the mouth moments in your own life?
absolutely. A lot of it started at the age of 9 years old. The loss of my
Mm,
grandmother really was, it was a huge crush in my young childhood because I mean, honestly, I
mm,
had a great childhood up until that point in time, bro. Like, I have
yeah.
had a mother and a father in my life, right, that have been married
Yep.
for over 30 years now.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it hasn't been a perfect marriage, right? No, because no
Yep.
marriage is, but
That's right.
it has been a marriage that has withstood the test of time, so they'll say, right?
Mm,
And I just remember as a young boy, like being just so excited all the time. I have an older brother who's 11 and a half years older than me. I have a grandma, I have a
mm,
mom and a dad for those first
yeah.
8 years of my life. And regardless of anything that's going on in our family, what we may have versus what we don't have, I didn't care, bro. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I felt like I had every kid's dream. I had love from every direction. Um,
Mm,
and like I said, that main source of love being my grandmother,
mm,
when I lost her at 8, bro, things went dark for a while for me.
mm.
And I'll say this, right? Growing up in the inner city of South Florida is not easy, right?
Yeah.
And
You're right.
getting passed along in the system is even worse. So by the time I
Mhm.
was 11, 12 years old and I was in middle school, I was in middle school with a lot of my local friends from the neighborhood now, right? So I wasn't going
Yep.
to the special private school that my parents used to send me to and all this stuff because now it's '08 and it's the recession. And my
Right.
mother's struggling, with trying to keep her business together as a hairstylist. And my father is going through, potential incarceration for
Mm,
vehicular homicide,
mm.
and cancer.
Wow.
And my brother's in college walking on playing football at South Carolina
Yep.
State. It's just so much going on, bro. Like it was just
Yeah.
chaotic, right? And in the midst of confusion, like we make some poor decisions. So man, I started skipping school, smoking weed, disrespecting my
Mm,
teachers, selling weed, shooting dice. I mean, you name it, bro. Like I'm just being raw with
mm.
you. I'm being honest. And
Yeah.
I remember those days, man, being like absent minded, just not there,
Mm.
right? Like just sitting on a gift.
Yep.
And it wasn't until the end of my junior high school career, it was like probably the last couple months, we used to have these writing classes on Saturdays. And it was one particular Saturday that I, was dropped off. I was there, right?
Mm.
But I wasn't
Yeah.
there. And so I
Right.
wrote this paper that was apparently amazing that day, right? Like it's about the only day you're gonna catch me. I had done some work randomly was on a Saturday because I had to be there, right? Like I had no
Right.
choice because I kept skipping and kept missing. So I had to make up the work somehow to graduate to go to the next grade. So,
Right.
um, bro, I remember writing this paper, didn't put my name on it, left, right? Just left. Like my boy Marcus, who's now serving 25 years in prison, me and
Wow.
him, we decided, we're just gonna skip, go smoke some weed, probably do some other stuff we had no business until my dad came to pick me up because I had enough time
Mm,
to kind of, plan everything out because I was like, I'm gonna hurry up and write this paper. And then as soon as I get opportunity, I'm dipping out of this class. So I'm running, running, running. Me and him running. Security is chasing us. And I could feel God just talking to me like, son, go back, claim what's yours.
mm.
Like, don't leave, don't do this. Like, not again.
Yeah.
And man, as soon as I hit that gate and, I'm walking with Marcus and we just talking and smoking a blunt, I'm, 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 I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye this van beelining down the street and it's
Mm.
headed towards me. And bro, it's almost like the floodgates of heaven opened.
Right.
My dad appeared out of nowhere and he was
Wow.
like just going in on me. Like, and the what I remember was he told me, son, you're not cheating me, you cheating yourself. And
Mm.
those words and being caught in that moment and Marcus beelining it and going that way and then ultimately ending up serving 25 years in prison and me having the
Wow.
opportunity to right all my wrongs and go to private school again and play football and pursue my academics and go into a new environment and be exposed to so many things after that moment yielded me so much respect towards my father because in that moment
Mm.
you know I didn't realize I had a gift. And so when we got back to
That's
the
right.
school and my father sat down with administration, one of my friends had come to me and she shared with me that the teacher read your paper out loud to the class, didn't have a name on it, but she said, if this person would ever show up to class and put their name on their gift, they could be something one day. And bro,
Mm,
those words, they echoed in my mind, and if they've never left. In
mm.
From that point on, bro, I have, even when I fall, even when I stumble, even when I go through things, I always think to myself, I'm somebody's answer, and I got to continue to grind and fight it out each and every day to get the solution so that I can be the medicine for somebody that's sick.
Mm. Come on, Richard. That is,
Yeah.
I love that story because when I read it in the book, what came to my mind was one word, and it was that of grace, right? And I feel like you got it in that moment, that grace is an escape from sin. It's not an excuse for sin, right? You were like, dude, this is an offering to me where it's like, boom, God can drastically just transform the trajectory of my life in the snap of a finger, but it's got to click for me. And I love what you said, that you are sitting on almost like untapped potential. You were sitting on your gift, but you weren't implementing it. You weren't using it. And that's what I love about what we're about to unpack with your book, because as one of our, mutual friends, Inky Johnson, as he puts it,
Amen.
talent is the cheapest thing we'll ever possess, right? Like, that's such a great quote, because what you go into and what you dive into in this book is you unpack the necessary ingredients or the intangibles to help us really step out of the pits that we may find ourselves in and into the full purpose and potential that God has always destined us for. You break this book down uniquely, right? I was telling you before we jumped on here, you have unique segments in the book. You have the boy, the man, and the king. And within each section, you talk about kind of 3 different characteristics or lessons or principles that God really revealed to you and taught you during that season of your life. To begin, I want to begin with the boy, right? You kind of mentioned the story from when you were just a boy. You were going through some challenges, some difficult times, making maybe some bad decisions, so on and so forth. But you broke it down into 3 phrases, right? Morals, respect, and character.
Yeah.
Richard, to the young boy or girl out there who maybe is listening today, maybe to the parent listening today, why do you believe those 3 words were so imperative for you to understand and to begin implementing in your life, especially at such a young age, to help set up the trajectory of the man that I'm talking to today?
Man, that is an amazing question, and I thank you for it. When you look in the Bible at a young David, David was already anointed even when he was out in the field, developing his character
Mm,
and becoming David, right? And so when you think
mm,
about like where we are as a society, what are we implementing and teaching our kids internally, right? In schools, in sports, all this stuff, right? Like these were non-negotiables, right? So like these are 3
yeah,
non-negotiables. These aren't 3 options, right? These are 3 non-negotiables you must have and possess within you, right? And so
yeah.
David, the young boy out in the field, tending to the sheep, doing what he's supposed to do, taking care of the palace, right? Like gleaning
Hmm.
from the fact that he wasn't one of the sons that anybody thought was really worth anything, right?
Right,
And so that
right.
process of being unseen, the things that you don't see, but pay it forward for you later as a man, right? The development of the heart, right? Like that's heart work, right? Like morals, respect, and character. Like if that's not ingrained in your heart, when you get
Mm,
older, it's gonna be tough for you. And so for me, I was a young David. As I mentioned, I had a grandmother who kept me in church Sunday, Wednesday, right? I had a mother who prayed for me tirelessly. You know, I had a father who was struggling, just keeping it real, right? Like my father struggled, but yet and still, he knew the word. He sought God's face
mm,
in the midst of his struggling as a man, right? I had a brother who was off on his own, fighting his own battles, but yet and
mm,
still instilling those things in me from afar. And so when my brother got up close on me going into high school, and I made that shift from a young David into this foreseeing lion that was taking the scene, right, as a high school All-American, all these things. It wasn't what I was doing on the field that caught people's attention as much as who I was as a human being in the community, right? Because people seen me do a 180, right? From that kid who was growing up in the church, all this stuff, to then going into the streets and then flipping it and turning it around into a positive narrative and becoming a neighborhood hero. You know, man, I mean, like, it's just such a wild turn of events. And it all started with those foundational pieces, right? So a lot of people are ready to build up, but they're not willing to go down into the ground and build. That bedrock, that's bedrock.
That's
right? Like morals, respect, and character are your bedrock for your faith. That's the foundational principles that I had to have in order to stand before a great man such as Coach Sweeney once I got to college.
Man, the bedrock, right? That's the foundation that was necessary. You said those are the non-negotiables. And I'm so thankful you brought up the man David. He's one of my favorite characters in all of Scripture. And I love what you said, that those three things, they need to be embedded deep inside of our heart. Because what was the prayer of David? The heart cry of David was that God would bless him with an undivided heart. God, help me to have those morals, the respect, and the character necessary internal, right? Yes. Help me not to stray off of the path and the purpose that you have me on. Yeah, he did, right? He wasn't perfect. We know that about David. But at the end of the day, that's why I believe God called him a man after his own heart, because he prayed for that undivided heart each and every day. And that should be our heart cry as well. I love this term character. Kind of already mentioned it. My dad always taught me, the phrase that character is what you do when nobody's watching, right? Yeah. It's kind of like doing your work in the dark. There's a guy named Joshua Metcalf who wrote a book called Win in the Dark. And this is what he said. In this book, he talks all about everybody wants to shine under the bright lights, but what we must remember is that the bright lights only reveal our work in the dark, right? Sometimes it's that internal process that you're talking about, which is the product that we're looking for. But something that I really also got out of that first section in The Boy, right, in that segment of your book, is this idea that we also have to remember that our internal, what you're talking about, the bedrock, is oftentimes influenced by our external, right? It's super important to recognize who you're surrounding yourself with, because it's honestly, it really comes down to our environment is what shapes our experience. You've had some influential people in your life. You already mentioned your wife, Kayla. You already started to mention Coach Dabo Sweeney, mentors like E.T., Eric Thomas, Billy, Joe, your grandmother, your brother, right? Your mom and your dad. How imperative is it for everybody to understand, Richard, this idea that community, right, is just as important in some terms as character?
Man, so you only go as far as accountability will take you, right? And when you are in a place where you have people holding you accountable, that's dangerous, real dangerous. Like when you're living carefree vicariously through your own set of beliefs as opposed to a core belief system that is rooted and based in principles that, like, for me, I'm still growing each and every day. Right. And everybody needs to have mentorship be a part of their daily character development curriculum. Like you have to be that intentional, right? About every morning that you step foot out the door, you have to ask yourself the question, how am I going to show up for others today, and continue to do that on a daily basis? Because here's the thing, like you can give a command, but can you take direction? Can you follow? Right. And so for me, I've been adamant about protecting relationships and being honest with people with where I'm at, and never once telling them a lie, because when you tell someone a lie, you got to tell like 5 to 10 more lies to cover up that original lie. And so for me, when I think about mentorship, when I think about these relationships that you mentioned, none of them are perfect. Right? Like I've had some tough conversations with each one of those individuals, but I've always shot them straight. Like no matter what the down and distance was in life, I've shot them straight. And for that, each person has let me into their red zone,
Yeah.
their sweet spot. Like, they might treat other people a certain kind of way or keep them at arm's length, but they've always kept me close. And it's
That's right.
because I understand the value in vulnerability, and
Mm,
that being transparent with people creates trust. So
that's right.
therefore, there is no lack in our relationship because we're both feeding off of one another. It's reciprocal. And it's a dual role of taking ownership and saying, you know what, like, we got to challenge each other. We can't stay
Hmm.
here. We got to keep going here. We got to keep rising. And so, man, I'm just, like I said, thankful, for those relationships and for the trust and for the vulnerability, because that's ultimately forged me through the fire and into the man that I am today.
And that's exactly what God does. He gives us friends and community for the fiery seasons of life, right? I was just interviewing a guy named Justin Early last week on the podcast, and he talks about a friend is someone who knows you fully and loves you anyway. Right. And that's exactly what you're saying. We're made for people. We're made for relationships. Genesis 2:18, it's the first time in all of scripture that God said that something was not good. And in
Yeah.
Genesis 2:18, it says, for it is not good that man be alone, right? Isolation is the enemy to growth, to development, to faith, to whatever God has you on, right? To progress in general. We need people to come alongside of us and to invest these necessary ingredients inside of us as well. You
Yeah.
mentioned the word trust, right? As you
Yeah.
talked about, God kind of had you step out of that season of being a boy into growing into the man, right, that you are. It then went on to discuss, you talked about responsibility, trust, and patience within that second section of the book. Two like pivotal quotes that like hit me between the eyes that I wrote down, right? And I wanted to highlight were the first quote that you mentioned, posted on the wall of Clemson football's team meeting room, says, right is right, even if no one is doing it, and wrong is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. The
Yeah.
second quote that you go on to talk about a little bit later, and I think in that very same chapter that kind of expounds upon the same principle, is the most important action a man can take is to commit to something. That commitment entails making sacrifices, losing sleep, doing more work than he ever expected, and most of all, leaning on God. It's this idea, right, that we would much rather endure the pain of discipline than endure the pain of regret. Richard, to what kind of extent could you give us some encouragement in this moment for somebody that may find themselves in like a grinding process like season of life, but to help them stay rooted and anchored in the season that God has them in, because he may just be producing and preparing them for a brighter future ahead?
Hear me, and hear me very clearly. We all consistently do things, right? You are consistently what you do. But what separates people that are consistent from people that are committed is this: your level of obedience, to sacrifice yourself, crucify your flesh, and to live according to his will and his purpose. And so, what do I mean by that? See, for me, right, like, I consistently was able to perform and be what other people expected me to be, as opposed to allowing people to meet me where I was and help me to get to where I wanted to be, right? So as a 26-year-old man now who's married, all these things, it was a process to get here, bro. Like, I wasn't always um, committed. I was consistent. I wake
Mm-hmm.
up every day. I show up
Yeah.
every day. I tell you I love you, but are you committed to that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
commitment issue versus consistency is where error takes place, right? Like, we see it in the Bible so many times, right? Like, Peter consistently told Christ, my Lord, I love you. I trust you. Christ is looking at him like, okay, Peter, I hear you, but I'm not feeling you. Like, I already know
Yeah.
you're not committed to me. I already know when the opportunity for you to run, you're going to run. And so one of the things that I love
Mm.
about someone that you mentioned, Inky, I asked him a question. I said, you oftentimes talk about in the face of opposition and adversity, like, break that down for me. And he said this, he said, outlast it, outlast it, right? Like, whatever you're going through, just outlast it. Whatever you're dealing with, outlast it. Don't let it weigh you down, right? To the point where you can't ever get back on your post, right? And I think a lot of times we abandon our post in life, and we give other people the ability to take advantage of us because we're not anchored in nothing. No belief system should be able to be torn apart if it's firm. If it's a firm belief system. Like if I said to you, bro, I believe that Christ is going to come back tomorrow, you probably look at me and be like, how you know that?
Right.
I might not truly know, but I believe that if he did come back tomorrow, I would be ready because I've been committed up to this point, and I've been consistent with him up to this point. So I'm ready. So I'm not saying, okay, if Christ came back tomorrow, I got to get ready. No, I stayed ready so I didn't have to get ready. That's how you outlast the times of hardship, of struggle, of brokenness, is when you're prepared for the worst outcome. Like you're preparing for worst case scenario each and every day, but you're expecting joy to come in the morning. You're expecting God to move in a mighty way tomorrow, today, right? Like when you are living in that place of, I expect that because of what I do consistently and what I'm committed to every day, God is going to fulfill his promise. And it keeps you locked into your process.
Yes. And that idea that beliefs are what fuel behaviors, right? Or our expectation is what fuels our level of effort, which fuels our level of execution. I love that word, outlast. I always talk about one of the most difficult times in my life. Our listeners have heard all about it several times, right? But one of the most difficult seasons of my life that I was going through, I came across an article and it was talking about, it kind of painted this scene or this image or this picture of a massive storm just billowing and rolling over the Colorado Rockies. And it says that there's only one animal in the world that runs into the face of the storm. That animal's the buffalo, right? They actually run into the storm. And what they talked about is when you can run into the storms of life, that you actually get through them at a much quicker rate and you come out stronger on the other side. Whereas all of the other animals, right? Us as people, we try to outrun our pain. And unfortunately, what happens is those storms just encompass us for longer. They wear us down. They get us discouraged and disappointed. But when we run into the face of adversity, when we outlast rather than outrun, dude, something amazing can happen, because then we recognize that Romans 8, that we are more than conquerors through him who loved us, right? It's that idea that we have overcoming in our DNA. That's what God created us for, Richard. And I love, that's kind of what you're breathing into us today, my friend. Dude, as we only have a couple more questions. I know you're on a couples retreat. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, man. But you then transition from the man to the king, right? And you talk about these three very, in my opinion, distinct and imperative qualities that we need to all implement within our daily lives and possess. You talk about how we need to carry ourselves with class, integrity, and love. As I mentioned, these are incredibly important to recognize and to begin applying into our daily lives. And I just wanted to ask this up front, if you could kind of just break down that last section a little bit, but also why were those three, the last three, that you truly believe are what push us into the royalty that God ultimately destined for us?
Because how you do anything is how you do everything. And if you do everything with class, if you do everything out of love, and if you apply integrity before all, right? Actively pursue doing what's right, even when everybody else might be doing wrong. Love, even despite the brokenness, despite what was planted, could have been hatred, could have been resentment, could have been unforgiveness. But when you pluck up the roots of those things and you recondition the heart, you recondition the mind to believe that you can and you will love despite, right, the thorn that might be in somebody's flesh, right, that you might have placed there, or the thorn that might be in your flesh because somebody else placed it there. and you decide that, you know what, like, I'm not going to treat people based on how I feel. Because if I woke up every day and started
Mm,
treating people based on how I feel, I wouldn't treat them with class. I wouldn't be able to look at
mm,
people in the eye and say, you know what? Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. Right? So those are all the intangibles of a king, right? When you can walk into a room and you can look somebody in the eye and confidently say, man, I don't know you, but I love you and I'm praying for you. And you put your
mm,
left hand on the shoulder, you grip his hand and you shake it and you come close to people, that's showing love.
mm,
That's showing respect. That's showing integrity. That's showing that you honor and value people in their space, right? So, like, those are
mm,
just small things that I think now, as we've gotten so conditioned with COVID, post COVID, space, 6 feet, it's like we got to get back to really like honing in on our inner king, right? Like,
yeah,
kings don't fight
yeah.
and divide territory. They multiply and add, right? So like they're always
Mm,
looking for ways in which they can add value. And so for me, I live by this one principle: add more in value than I receive in payment so that service can be the currency to my elevation. And
whew,
those three things have,
mm,
bro, they have taken me well beyond my 26 years of living.
mm. Add more in value than I receive in payment. Dude, that's powerful right there, right? And I think that's a word that so many people need to implement into their lives. What you've instilled within us today, Richard, I think is just the spirit of encouragement. How I kind of want to close from my end, and then I'm going to drop the mic back off to you to kind of just close us off with the word that God has placed upon your heart for such a time as this, is a quote that I read the other day. It said, "It's never too late to become who you might have been," right? Too many times, Richard, we hear all those shoulda, woulda, coulda stories and statistics, right? But it's never too late to become who you might have been. In other words, it's never too late to start investing in the relationship that maybe you've neglected for too long. It's never too late for an apology, right? To accept an apology or extend forgiveness to others. It's never too late to begin making the decisions or cultivating the habits necessary to be the man or the woman that you've always desired to become. It's never too late to put a foot in the ground and to run back to God, who's constantly been pursuing and chasing after you all along. It is never too late. Richard, for you, man, what is just the pressing word of hope, encouragement, and motivation that you want to leave with all of our listeners today as to how they can begin prioritizing and understanding that truly the man or the woman is greater than any brand they could ever do?
So here's the thing. We're all looking to be successful in some way, shape, form in our lives, right? And I think how we measure our success isn't going to be on a dollar amount. It isn't going to be on a title. It's going to be based upon how many people you bless. And for me, ministry starts at home. So when people see me and they see my children, I want them to see Christ. It's simple. Because if they can see and
Come
know
on.
that Christ is real, when you deal with me or when you deal with my children or when you deal with anybody that's a part of my bloodline or my lineage or my legacy, right? Like, you're going to be blessed by us, even if I don't like know you, but for 5 minutes, even if I don't have maybe all the money in the world, right? Like, I might be able to give you something if I'm intentional about, again, protecting like everything that I've built by basing it off of how many people I'm able to bless with what I have. Not how much I'm able to hold on
Mm,
to myself and keep and show, but how much I'm able to pour back in, re-sow it, right? So like not chew
mhm,
my seeds, like, oh, tell everybody what I'm doing, but everything that I do, keep putting it back in the ground. Keep digging, keep planting seed, right? Because one day when you reap and you look at your life, you'll be like, man, I didn't even have to say anything, or I didn't even have to pay, any attention to that, because bro, I've been focused on my garden. I've been tending to my garden, right? Like Adam should have been doing, right? For Eve, I've been tending to my
mhm,
garden. God said, look, You can have everything in this space, just don't touch that over there. And that's where I live every day. Is like, God, you giving me so much in my garden. I just got to keep sowing, keep sowing, keep sowing. And one day, when we reap, you reap what you sow.
That's it, bro. Plow dirt now in your garden, right? So that way you can reap the harvest that God has ultimately set aside and destined for your life. Richard Yeargin, man, you are such a blessing, bro. In my life personally, in countless other lives, you just instill and really possess the words impact and influence. And I so appreciate that. But beyond that word influence, you kind of possess the word intimacy, right? You share experiences with people. You place relationships above, other things in your life, above your brand. And I love that whole concept of what you've been chatting about today, which is it's the man, it's the internal, right? It's the character that's more important than the external or the reputation. Bro, thank you for your message. Thank you for instilling it within all of us today, for your time and willingness. I want to end with this. Where can all of our listeners go to learn more about you and to be able to purchase your book, The Man is Greater Than the Brand?
Oh man, you asked the $1 million question. I appreciate you asking, brother. So if possible, I'm just gonna share. Can you see
Yes.
this? So you can go here to the website, richardyergin.com.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And as you'll see here, you could purchase the book. You could do whatever you need to do. If anyone's ever interested in, potentially booking me for anything, you could obviously do that here. So whatever you all need to do, feel free. Emails here, the phone number, all that's correct. Obviously, you can find me on socials, LinkedIn, Insta, all that good stuff, Twitter, my LinkedIn profile, just to kind of share. I didn't come up, but you get it. Like just anything, like however I can make an impact or help anyone. I just love to add value, like I said. And so thank you again, brother, for having me, for trusting me with this opportunity. I'm thankful, bro. Thank you. Thank you.
Brother, you are a blessing. To all the listeners out there, please go and get involved with all that Richard is doing. Book him for speaking engagements. Go purchase the book, The Man is Greater Than the Brand. It will impact and change the trajectory of your life. I'm telling you it will. Richard, at the end of the day, man, you're a game changer. You're a life changer. I believe you're a world changer, my friend. Thank you again for joining me today. I love and appreciate you, bro.
I love and appreciate you, bro. Thank you. Thank you.